Hi, I just picked up a 15-pound brisket at the grocery store, and I'm going to tell you the story of a pastrami. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Pastrami is what's known as wet cured, like corned beef and bacon. These are cured in a brine that contains salt and sugar and a curing agent. The curing agent is Instacure number 1, commonly referred to as pink salt because it has been dyed pink since forever, so that you wouldn't mistakenly use it in regular cooking, which you don't want to do because it's poisonous. It contains 6.25% sodium nitrate, which is the chemical that's responsible for giving cured meats that characteristic flavor and color. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of it in celery seed, which is why they use celery seed in so-called uncured bacon. They claim that it doesn't have any nitrite because it's in the celery seed, and that's just a little legal thing they're able to do. But it is in there. Now, the amount of nitrite you need to properly cure depends on what you're doing. In a wet cured application, you're looking for in the range of 100 to 120 parts per million of nitrite in your curing bin. If you're making dry cured sausages, that gets up to over 500, but we're not doing that here. I target 120 parts per million. And I do that by weighing the piece of meat, which I already did. It's just shy of 1.5 kilograms. And so because of the math, if I want 120 parts per million, it requires me to have 3 grams of Instacure number 1, which I have already measured out. I also like to have about 1% or 1.5% of salt in my brine. Traditionally, you use at least 3% for shelf life, which is why if you get a commercial corned beef, they're very salty. But I like to have control over how much salt is in my product, and so that's why I like to do this by myself. You want to use a very good quality salt. For the amount of meat that I have, I need 22 grams of salt, which I will add here. And I want 17 grams of sugar, and I'm going to use brown sugar. And this part is not terribly critical that you get exact. Close enough is close enough. Although that is not the case for pink salt. You want to use the right amount. So this amount of kosher salt, Instacure, and sugar will give me 120 parts per million nitrate, 1.5% of salt, and 1% of sugar. And that's based on the 1.5 kilograms of meat plus the 200 grams of water that I'm going to use to make the brine. Okay, so here is 200 grams of boiling water, hot water, to which I will add the cure ingredients so that they can start to dissolve. Now, at this point, you could use this to cure pastrami or bacon or corned beef, because the flavor profile of all of them depends on the spices that you use. I'll set that aside so it can start to dissolve. For pastrami, the flavor profile is dominated by black pepper and coriander, which I have previously weighed out into here. There's about a tablespoon each of coriander and peppercorns. So I'm going to kind of crush them up a little bit in this mortar and pestle, which is always entertaining. Not a whole lot. Because they are going to go in the brine. And I'll let that steep while it cools off. In the interim, while I'm waiting for that to cool, um, again, like I said, the difference between pastrami and corned beef is the flavor profile. And while for corned beef, instead of using the black pepper and coriander, you could use a commercial-based pickling spice, I highly recommend the recipe given in this book, Charcuterie, by Michael Ruhlman and Brian Polson. There is a recipe for a pickling spice in there that is absolutely superior. And this was the first book on curing meats that I ever got. There are many things I like about it. What I don't like is I don't think it adequately treats the whole doing things by weight and parts per million and percent weight of sugar and salt and the like. I don't think it adequately treats that. However, it is a fine book, and the recipes in it are really good, and especially the pickling spice. The brine is now cooled, and I have the piece of meat in a food saver bag. And I love using food saver bags because an important part of this process is that the meat has to be fully submerged in the brine. And if you use like a traditional container for this, you need a lot more brine to do that. So I don't like to have, and it's bigger. It takes up more space in the refrigerator. It's harder to handle, and I just don't like that. So I like to use these bags. They're smaller. You can use a lot less brine, and because part of the formula for the amount of nitrate and salt and seasonings that you use is based on the weight of the water. Then the more water you use, the more seasonings you have to use to no real good effect. So, so that's why I like to use vacuum sealer bags. Now, what I'm going to do now is I will is you pour the brine into the bag and seal it. I won't do that now because it's boring. I'll show you afterwards. And 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 then and then the whole package goes in the refrigerator for a week to 10 days so that the curing agent and the salt can penetrate the meat fully. I expect that this one will probably take only a week because of the thin section, but I'll give it a good 10 days just to make sure. Now, what's going to happen in this time, and I want to go back to earlier, you might have noticed that on one point I said that the Instacure is poisonous if you use it as, a cooking condiment, and yet it can't hurt you when it's used to cure meats. The reason for that is once the soaking process starts, the sodium nitrate undergoes some chemical changes. One of the things that happens is it creates a nitrogen oxide, which is the agent that binds to the hemoglobin in the meat and gives it that cured flavor and the color. And so by the time you get to where the process is done, there is no sodium nitrite left. It's converted into other things. It's undergone chemical changes and it is no longer bad for you. Now, back in the late 70s, there was a newspaper or magazine article that said that nitrites are carcinogenic. And that was really very, very misleading. Suffice it to say that uh, those concerns were really, really, really overblown to the point where it was almost like the guy lied. And maybe he's just a media guy and he doesn't know what he's talking about. But in any case, um, uh, 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 that can only be an issue if you're using very high levels of nitrite, like for dry curing, and you use really, really high temperatures while you're cooking. And even then, the danger wasn't nearly as much as he was leading you on to believe. So don't worry about that. And I'm babbling, so I will continue on. Um, as far as the amount of nitrate to use, this is the formula. So if you guys decide to do this, and it's like I said, it's really important to have a good scale. To get 120 parts per million of nitrate, which is what I typically use for my bacon and my pastrami and corned beef, the formula for that is the weight of the cure that you need, the cure number one pink salt, is equal to 120 times the weight of the meat plus the weight of the water that you used for the brine divided by 6,250,000. So write that down if you're interested, or come back and look at it later. If you're really interested, you can also go to the United States Department of Agriculture website. Has a 100-page PDF that discusses all the ins and outs of commercial curing of meats and how to do it and what the legal limits are, and that was also very helpful to me. Okay, here we are. We're all bagged up. It's ready to go in the refrigerator. There are some air bubbles in it, but that's not that big a deal. I leave it in, and twice a day I move it around and flip it over, stick it upside down, and put it back in the refrigerator. And it will stay in there for, I'll leave it for 10 days just to make sure, but like I said, probably a week will be good. And we will pick up the process at that point. Oh, and one other thing, this formula right here, interestingly enough, it turns out that the amount of Instacure you need to get about 120 parts per million is just about 1 teaspoon for each 5 pounds of meat and brine. So you can do it that way. I much prefer using a scale. So yeah, see you in a couple of weeks. Here we are. It's 2 weeks later, and I've taken the brisket out of the bag and washed it off. You can see that the color of the meat has changed. That's because of the action of the curing salt. And I have toasted some more coriander and black pepper and coarsely ground it in my mortar and pestle. And so I'm going to add this back on. Now, most of the recipes I've seen don't have you do it twice. They'll have you do it in the bag, put it in the bag while it's curing, and then just take it out, rinse it off, and put this on. Or else just cure it in the bag without any seasoning whatsoever, in terms of coriander and pepper. And then just put it in at this stage afterwards. I like to do both. I don't know if it actually helps, but that's just what I like to do. I'm kind of a big flavor sort of guy. All right, so there we go. All right, so now at this point, you can consider yourself done if you wish. At this point, we would braise it slowly in an oven, covered with a little bit of water for some number of hours until it's done. However, smoke to me is one of the important aspects of the flavor of a pastrami, and although people who will remain nameless have been known to use instant smoke in the cure bag to provide a little bit of smoke flavor, I'm fortunate enough to have the smoker. So this is going to go in the smoker and smoke at a low temperature for, I don't know, some number of hours until I think it's good enough. I want some smoke flavor, but I don't want it to be like barbecue smoke. So I'm going to pause here. Okay, so now here we are. We got maybe 5 hours of smoke on it, perhaps somewhat less because I run an errand and the smoker had stopped working. So somewhere between 4 and 5 hours of smoke on the smoker, and man, it looks so good. It's got a nice smoke aroma on it. So at this point, you really can. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the what looks like the most marbled end, and I'm going to put this in a pan thusly with a little bit of water. Yeah, I'll probably find something smaller for it. And I'm going to put it in a very slow oven, maybe 2 1/4, 2 1/2 tops. And oh, here now I've cut it in half. I should show you this. You can see that it's pink all the way through. This is a very cold smoke process. It never got more than about 150 degrees. So it is raw still all the way through. You can tell that the pink color is different than it would be if it was just untreated meat. And as a matter of fact, I can see, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I can see a bit of the rainbow sheen effect on it. That's very nice. In any case, if the cure had not adequately penetrated, there'd be a line down the middle of it where you could see the distinct color change. So, like I said, I'm going to put this in the oven at about 2 1/4 with just a little bit of water. It needs to stay very moist, and the rest of it I'm gonna cut and vacuum seal and put it in the freezer. While technically speaking, this is a curing process, I do not have enough salt in here to keep bacteria from growing, so it does need to be frozen. If I had, 5% salt in there, it wouldn't need that. But as it is, it does. So I'll put this in the oven and we'll come back later to see what it looks like after it's ready to eat. Okay, and so now the moment we've all been waiting for. It's been in a slow oven for, I don't know, 6 hours maybe, and it came out really, really nice. It's absolutely delicious. And yes, you can tell that I cheated and had some already. But I'm just, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of shred it. It's just pulling apart so beautifully. Oh my gosh. And it really tastes good. Oh my gosh. It's got great smoke, very tender and succulent. And I think what I'm going to do is put this way, somewhere over here. I'm going to make a couple of sandwiches. I have this Russian black bread that I made a couple days ago from the King Arthur. King Arthur flour has some good recipes. This is their King Arthur, the Russian black bread recipe. I made a couple substitutions out of it, but just right out of the gate, it sounds kind of weird because it's got like cocoa powder and stuff in it. But it's really, really good. So I've got that, I think will work really well with this, and some Swiss cheese. And I think I'm going to put a little bit of mustard on it. And just because, I don't know, it might be weird, but I made some kind of a tangy slaw. I'm going to throw that on there. And I'm going to eat one, and I'm going to go upstairs and give one to Debbie. But anyway, I highly encourage you guys to do this. It's really not that difficult. I made it harder on myself by getting a whole brisket and having to trim it. But just go to the store and get a plain brisket, not a corned brisket, just a plain brisket, and a scale of salt, and you too can, yeah. Slow food is great. Anyway, I'm gonna eat.